Okay, we're now recording on YouTube. So Stephanie, whenever you want to get started, it's all yours. We're 2 minutes early. It's up to you guys. Excuse me, one second. Hey Phyllis, your breathing noise is sounding again. I'm gonna fix that. So she asked me to
If
tell
you
everybody to imagine her holding her phone upside down so she can hear and then talk when she needs to. It's actually worse now,
if
Phyllis.
you don't if you don't hear me breathing, call the morgue.
Okay.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to Legislative District 19, our Senate candidate debate. Thank you for joining us. And just as a reminder, we are sponsored by the Wahkiakum County Republican Party and the Wahkiakum County Democratic Party, who are working together for the good of the county and all of us rural folks. This event is also live streamed on YouTube. The channel is called Wahkiakum RaadDteam. So welcome everybody who's watching from YouTube. I'm Stephanie Lights, and I will be your moderator for tonight's debate. Our panelists are Dean Tacko, incumbent for the Democratic Party, and Jeff Wilson, challenger, Republican Party. I'm going to briefly go over the rules for tonight's forum, and then we'll start by letting the candidates introduce themselves. Here are the rules. All of the questions that I will read have been submitted ahead of time in response to a request that was both in the Eagle and online. There will be no questions taken from the audience. I will ask a question, then each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. With 15 seconds remaining, our timekeeper will state 15 seconds. At the end of 2 minutes, she will tell us that time's up. I will allow each candidate or the candidate speaking to finish his thought. And then the second candidate will have a chance to do a quick 30-second reply if they choose. If a candidate has time remaining in his 2 minutes, he may continue to speak on another topic if he likes, but there will be no banking of time for later. I will rotate the order of the questions, or I will rotate the order that the candidates respond to the questions, and each question will rotate to a different one. Let's get started with our first question. Candidates, will you please take 2 minutes and tell us about yourself and why you are running? Jeff, will you start?
I will. And Stephanie, I don't mind taking some of my time up for my 2 minutes to make sure I tell Wahkiakum County, both the Democrats and the Republicans, you guys raise the bar where it should be. You work together. I enjoy these forums. So kudos to you. My name is Jeff Wilson. I currently reside in Cowlitz County. I've lived in Longview for over 50 years, and I attended local grade school. Then I went on to college at Western. And I've always enjoyed making Southwest Washington my home. What a great place. Today, in fact, I was out on the beautiful Columbia River trying to test my hand at fishing. And again, it's just one of the many reasons to be here. After schools, I kind of got busy to go to work, but my work career started full-time at age 11. So by the time I was 16, I had saved up enough money to buy my first automobile. By the time I was 20, I had bought my first house. And all of this was really a product of my upbringing. My parents said I can have anything I want and as much of it as long as I'm prepared to do the work for that. And that work ethic is compliments of my mom and dad. But I've taken that and pridefully so, I have started my very first business at age 26. And that business is still in business to this day, providing family wage jobs. I'm very proud of that. In fact, I have started multiple successful businesses, and I know firsthand
15 seconds.
How to be an employer and an employee. I started my political career at age 55. I'm a Port of Longview commissioner, and we're going to talk more about this later on, I'm sure, when we get to the meat of the subject. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Dean?
Yeah, well, good evening. And I would first off want to thank, I believe it's Mary and Ron for putting this on, and especially you, Stephanie, for being there in the middle and asking the questions. We've gone through this a number of times over the last several months introducing ourselves, so I'll try to keep it really short on the historical end of it. Born in El Waco, went to grade school there, moved up to Cathlamet, graduated from high school in Cathlamet, did 2 years at the Lower Columbia College, which I'm really proud of. That's one thing that I've really tried to do in the legislature is support the community colleges, because I went there and a number of my family has before going on to four-year institutions. And the community college system really is a great thing that we have in this state. Then I went on to Western Washington University and got a degree there. Went in the Army, came home, kind of kicked around for a bit. Ended up back to Cathlamet, ended up on the city council for a year and then ran for county assessor, spent one term there. Then went up to Kelso to be the chief deputy in the assessor's office here. And when Ray Ryan retired as county assessor, I ran twice and got elected. And then in December 2004, just before the 2005 session, I was appointed to the House. And 11 years later, I was in the Senate. Always enjoyed Southwest Washington. I had never lived anywhere else. I've traveled extensively, and I can tell you there are some really neat places in the world, but there's no place like Southwest Washington. I enjoy the hunting, the fishing.
15 seconds.
It's my home. It's where I was born, and I hope it's where I die.
Okay. Thank you. The second question, if elected, what is one big goal you would like to accomplish, and how will you make sure it gets implemented? And Dean, will you start this time?
Yeah, I saw that you were going to ask that question, and I said to myself, there is no one big goal. We have so many things on our plate that I'm going to probably hit a number of things. One thing that I'm very interested in is rural broadband, and I know there's a number of us that are going to taking off the moratorium for retail authority for PUDs to offer broadband. One of my other things I'm going to certainly been working on that I've worked on for literally years is to get the oyster growers their permit, whether it's administratively or it takes us legislation. And I have sponsored legislation, but it's a tough nut to crack. I want to do an independent review of the Growth Management Act. I had a budget proviso last year for that. The governor vetoed it. I was disappointed, but he did the right thing because it was expensive. And in this time, we need to watch our budget. I also want to take another look at, and I think we're going to get there eventually, another look at the prototypical school model and how we fund schools. I think we're setting ourselves up for another McClary type case in the fact that we have rural kids that don't have broadband, and they're not getting the same opportunity for education that the students that do have broadband. If we're going to have some of these models of partially at home, partially at school. Another thing I want to work on is last year or 2 years ago, I prime sponsored a bill to try and get us back into the tourism industry or tourism promotion. In the last recession, we killed the Washington State tourism funding, and I got it back last year on a public-private deal. It's targeted toward rural tourism, which is basically us, but it's a little convoluted, and I wouldn't say we're struggling, but we could use more money. And so we got to I'd like to mess around with that model that we're doing and try and get it to work a little bit smoother so we can get tourism promotion out there. And I could go on with more, but I have a feeling that my time is getting really close.
All right, thanks, Dean. Jeff?
Wow. Well, I'm going to stick with kind of the one goal, and I'll summarize it as follows. Let's just throw out the word fairness. I think for a long time, the voters and the citizens of everybody in the 19th district have been very concerned about transparency. And do I trust the government? I see a steady and a sharp decline from the people I run into and visit about is the overall transparency of how the government represents and works for us. And to give you an example of that, you'll hear both sides use as a campaign talk about ghost bills, which are title-only bills. And yet I haven't heard Senator Taco ever at one time say, look, I'm going to surrender using that skullduggery, that kind of political tactic. These kind of things the public expects us to be very transparent. There's nothing transparent about a ghost or title bill, and I don't really care who uses it. The Democrats, the Republicans, your neighbors, your enemies, it is not fair. And that's what I'm going to try to bring back to Olympia. It's a little bit of restoration of the trust. The trust is we don't have to tax you into success. We're not going to solve all of our problems by just simply taxing you and, again, running legislation at the wee hours of the night. I know that Senator Taco has, in fact, written or created a ghost bill. I would say most electeds may be guilty of it. I'm just hoping everybody is honest enough to end the practice. It's a simple task. It's bipartisan. Why can't we start the new representation of our citizens on the most equal and transparent
15
basis?
seconds.
So I think I've kind of beat that one to death. Thank you.
Can I reply? You said we get
You
30
may.
seconds.
Sorry about that.
I would-
You have, I had my
would-
mic muted. You have
I
30
would
seconds.
definitely agree with Jeff that he's beat that one to death. You know, this is this big thing, and I can tell you, it's inside baseball, basically. We don't use them anymore. It's been some time before we've had a title-only bill. So, you know, if you want to ride that to the Capitol, feel free.
Okay. All right. So our next question, what is the current status of the state budget? Is it better or worse than what you predicted a few months ago back in our primary forum? And what will you battle for as the budget is produced this next session? And Jeff, you'll go first.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. It's hard for me to really have any insider information as currently I'm not in the office, so I'm subject to the information I do have, and that is that we're jumping up and down and we're all excited that instead of an $8 billion hole, oh, we've only got a $4 billion hole. And listen, that is a very, very serious problem. I have always said that the crazy spending spree that Senator Taco has helped commence over the past few years isn't sustainable. And now we're faced with the ramifications of this pandemic. And going forward, you know, we've got some serious money issues to worry about, much less the failed promises that we've never even completed, such as the $30 car tabs. So in speaking of such, it's all going to come down to the budget. Some tough decisions are going to be made. I would enjoy very much tonight in front of all of your listeners if the incumbent, my opponent, would go online and say what I'm going to say. We're not going to tax our way into success or recovery. I am not going to support any form of an income tax. And I'd like the senator to say that. In fact, I'll go on record about taxation, that it's not going to be the fix. The spending has increased under his watch by over 59%. And nobody's paycheck has gone up 59%. You throw in a Boeing, loss of jobs, the loss of direct jobs that would have been in Grays Harbor because of the potash facility, it's gone too. So not only are we not going to tax our way into recovery, we better get ready to pave the way for our businesses to have a chance to succeed. And in the interim, they should have called a special session. They should have went to work and addressed things that the governor gets to do within his executive orders. I thought it would be very nice if we also had discussions this summer about also landlord relief. It's It's got to be a two-way street. It seems we've been going down one-way roads, and economically, I don't think we can afford to keep this up much longer. So to fill that hole, it's a good thing the rate stabilization
15
fund,
seconds.
known as the rainy day fund, has some money there, but some tough decisions are going to be made. I'm asking the voters to make it with me, a businessman, versus giving Dean Tackle the vote, who has raised your taxes, and now he's going to tell you he's going to cut all those expenses.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. And Dean, would you answer the question?
Well, sure. And Jeff has a little trouble with numbers. Our unfunded balance right now is about 2 billion, not 4 billion. And when he had an ad in the primary on the radio, he said our budget actually was 59 billion when it's 52.5 billion. So, you know, if you're going to throw numbers around, you ought to be accurate. It is, you know, our forecast is definitely better than it was in the primary. We gained about, well, it's arguable just where it is, but we are at about $2 billion short. You know, to just flat out say you're not going to raise any kind of revenue, I think is irresponsible. I think we have to look at everything. We have to look at cuts. We have to look at fund transfers, which we did in the last recession, and moved money out of some of the programs that weren't really necessary and moved them back over into the operating budget. Those monies have now been restored. And I'm not going to vote for an income tax. The Supreme Court has already ruled that it's an income tax based on the uniformity clause of the Constitution is not constitutional. So to think that throw it around about, I'm not going to vote for an income tax. Well, it doesn't matter whether you vote for it or not. The courts are going to throw it out. It's pretty obvious. So, you know, I'll just kind of leave it at there, that we're going to look at everything there is. We're going to do cuts. We're going to probably do some transfers. And I wouldn't say off the table is any kind of revenue. Some of it might be exemptions. We have a slew of exemptions out there for various things, and a lot of them aren't really doing the businesses or the individuals that much good. So if they really are just giving money away that could be used for schools or in-home health care or some other program, you know, let's take a look at it.
Okay. Thanks, Dean.
Yes.
Jeff, do you have something you'd like to add?
Absolutely. You know, my numbers, there are a lot of numbers. Again, the senator has these inside numbers. We just want to know the truth. 20 billion, 19 billion, 59%, 60. Listen, we're in trouble, and we need to face this with serious solutions. For example, the senator has readily voted for business and occupation increases time and time again. I would really like to hear him say he'd like to roll those back. He'd like to remove those rate increases on those businesses in order to help them.
That's 30 seconds. All right. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Our next question. What have you done, or what would you do to build a food distribution support system and to encourage farmers, agriculture, and commercial fishermen to produce more food to help avoid food insecurity issues?
That's
And this would be Dean, your turn to start. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of interesting because we have a work group that was set up 2 years ago to look at our food supply. And I sit on that committee, and we're looking at everything from transportation, distribution to, you know, food banks, you name it. And, you know, unfortunately, right in the middle of everything that we're doing, this COVID hit, and food is a big issue. You know, we're going to have to put a lot of money, and we already are putting a lot of money into subsidizing food banks and other programs like that. You know, we need to do a programs and procedures and whatever to help our agriculture. And I've sponsored a number of bills for the agricultural industry. And that's why I know that my opponent and others like to say, well, you got all this money from different places. And I'm not ashamed of that. I've gotten money from the onion growers, the potato growers, the wheat growers, the dairy industry. And I can just go right on down the line and name agricultural groups that are supporting my campaign because they know that I'm there to support the ag industry. I always have been and always will be. And so they know that I'm there trying to help keep these industries going. So, you know, I'm not afraid to say that I've taken money from a number of agricultural interests. So we got a lot of things to do. This COVID isn't helping us trying to, you know, we're plowing
15 seconds.
we're plowing potatoes into the ground, and now we're just giving them away, thankfully, to the potato growers. But there's no easy answer for this one, but I'm trying to.
Time's up.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Welcome back, Phyllis. And Jeff, will you go ahead and speak to that question?
Sure. You know, food is life. Food is essential, and food should not be politicized. You know, we really are in the land of plenty. We have a lot to offer, and each community throughout the 19th legislative district usually is involved in some program to make sure that whether it's seniors or kids or anybody, nobody should go hungry. And food insecurity alone, that's also a metaphysical state. That is something that needs to be taken very seriously. And it's ironic that in the 19th legislative district, a lot of our food has gone away. The food, when you talk about industry, you know, under Dean's years of service, we've seen things like the burrowing shrimp wipe out crops. We see a pandemic comes along, and the oysters aren't really needing to going to restaurants if they're not open entirely. So it's not only food insecurity, it's food economy. When I said food is life, it's everything. It keeps us alive, but it also keeps our communities alive. And this is the beautiful 19th legislative district. I was fishing today, trying to catch some fish. I believe in local food to local markets. I have served on the volunteer stewardship program for quite some time. It's a very good program. It helps the agricultural business. Was recently endorsed by the Farm Bureau, and I have family members that farm. So the importance of farming, that even needs to go into our educational system. For some reason, a lot of younger people seem to think that hunting and food gathering is at the
15
supermarket.
seconds.
It's not. We can turn some soil and be much more resilient, and food insecurity is a problem we need to all wipe out.
It's kind of interesting that he brings up the volunteer stewardship program, because that was a bill that I prime sponsored a number of years ago. It took me 2 to 3 years to finally get that through the legislature. But if you think volunteer stewardship program is a good program, I guess you can thank me, because it's my bill.
Hey, thank you. Those Wahkiakum kids know how to fish, hunt, and gather, though. I'm always trying to keep them in school, hunting on the weekends. Okay, our next question. If Senate Bill 5395, the sex ed bill, I'm sure most of you know out there, becomes law, what curriculum would you support to implement that bill, and why? And this time it's Jeff, your turn to start.
Well, let's give credit where credit is due, Stephanie and audience. Of course, Dean is a co-sponsor of this controversial legislation. And why would I call it controversial? It's not my singular opinion. There were over 260,000 men and women in Washington state that signed that petition to put it on the ballot. And I'm encouraging everybody this November to reject R90. R90 is on the ballot, and that's going to ask the moms and dads, all the parents, whether they support Dean's comprehensive sex education bill. I can't even get close to supporting it. And the number one reason why is we talk about keeping our local voices local so Stephanie can have her Wahkiakum discussions. That's what I want to preserve. I don't want this curriculum to be controlled by Seattle, and permission to seek or to make it difficult to opt out. that's something that's definitely been misplayed. This is a very graphic. It does instruct sex. It will be on the voter's pamphlet statement of one of the challengers to one of the persons that pushed this program through. Ultimately, the comprehensive sex education bill removes more of the voice of the parent and gives it to the school up north, or the school away from your local school. It should have never been conceived this way. It has some good merits when it comes to harm reduction. But again, this program was brought to you by Senator Dean Tacko, and now it's on the ballot as R90. Simply reject this horrible legislation this November.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Dean, just to repeat the question, we're looking for what curriculum would you support and implement, and why?
Well, it's up to the individual school district to make the curriculum and submit it. It's not, there is no standard curriculum. It is local control. And I don't care how much, I almost said a word I shouldn't have. I don't care how much of that stuff is out there on the internet. It's a bunch of BS, to be honest about it. This does not teach children about sex. And if you want to spin it that way, Jeff, just keep spinning it the way you want. This is about teaching kids, and primarily what's at odds is the younger kids. It's about teaching kids social emotional learning, what you let people touch, how you touch other people, how you bully. What do you do if you've been sexually abused? I brought it up the other night, and I hate to kind of talk about it because it is a friend of mine, but a friend of mine was sexually abused when they were young. Didn't know what to do, didn't even know what it was until they realized what it was. For 40 years, this friend of mine told me the other day that they've carried this burden with them because they didn't know what to do. That's what this bill is about. This bill is not about teaching sex. That is just so much bull. And it just, as you can see, it really bothers me that, you know, we have a bill that was to teach kids safety. And for whatever reason, it is being spun as teaching kids sex. And I tell you, like I said the other night, the people, including you, Jeff, that are spinning this thing on the social media, that this is about teaching sex, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Jeff, you can have 30 seconds to respond. And I can restate the question, just the piece, the curriculum piece, okay, was what we were looking for.
And
Oops.
I won't need the question restated. It's interesting that he would take such offense to this. Again, I started out earlier on talking about the 260,000 people that are truly irritated to put this on the ballot. So Senator Tacko, your legislation will be shot down under R90 by rejecting it. Quite frankly, this is some of the sex education that you pass through in the wee hours of the night. It's fairly graphic. This is for 9 and 10-year-olds. This has your name on it, sir. The people and the will of the people will speak this November, and we will reject R90, sir, regardless of what you say on tonight's debate.
Okay, so our next question is talking about COVID-19, to switch gears. One aspect of leadership I believe in is leading by example. So do you personally wear a face mask for COVID-19 protection whenever you're out in public or near other people? Do you encourage people of our district to do the same as you? Why or why not? And this one, Dean, will you start?
Yeah, I try to wear a mask, 100% of the time, to be honest. I lapse a couple times here and there, but if I'm anywhere around people, I'm wearing a mask. And I stay away from crowds as best I can. My crew, myself and my crew have been doorbelling. We wear a mask anytime we're out. We knock on a door, we step back 8 or so feet to give them some space. And I think it's the right thing to do. I've seen what I will call people from the other persuasion having rallies with very few people wearing masks. It's a given. You wear a mask, you're going to be safe, or safer. You're going to be safer for yourself, and you're going to be safer for others. it's just, to me, it just seems like common sense that you should wear a mask with these COVID days that we're approaching. And it's very apparent that the more you put people together in places, whether it's in college or schools or churches or theaters, you name it, bars, restaurants, as places open up, there's more and more infection. And so, you know, you really got to take this thing seriously. I feel bad. I used to go out and eat out from time to time, and my wife and I, we seldom go out anymore. We might stop by a restaurant and pick something up real quick, but I'm very concerned about people being together, because as more the people are together, the more you're going to have infections.
15 seconds.
I'm done.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. You know, the pandemic is very serious, and yet the pandemic has been very confusing. I've jumped up and down tonight about the government. Let the government be transparent. Be honest with us. We get a lot of information, and I'm not quite so sure the public buys all of it. We hear issues and directives like flatten the curve. You can go out and who's essential and who isn't. The worst part about this mask issue is what it's done to us. Through the governor and through our current leadership, we've set up systems to turn in our neighbor. We've set up systems to turn in our local businesses. I never thought I'd see the day where we would have people consciously and, you know, like I say, turning in violators of this mask. The mask is one of many forms of common sense PPE that can work. And a lot of other things will work too. The pandemic has reminded us all of a common practice called hygiene. You wash your hands. You don't touch certain things. And if you do, you rewash. There's a lot of practical things that America and the rest of the world needed to implement. And hygiene is always there. But comes with hygiene is the respect of somebody else. If somebody else is so fearful of the virus, you need to respect that. And that means putting your mask on, but that person too can avoid you. There's a lot of pro-choice. What has broken my heart is how we've turned this mask into a political enemy and pitted neighbor against neighbor. And I'm really sorry to hear that, because I think we're much better than this. And I think we can get through this. Another good reason for us to get past this and have a session back in work.
Time's up.
Thanks, Jeff. Dean?
Yeah, what?
Do you want to respond?
No, I'm fine.
No, you're good? Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So we'll go on to our next question. If the Governor Inslee was to issue another stay home, stay healthy order, what would you do in the Senate to support or to change that? And that would be, it looks like it is now Jeff's turn to start.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. If I understood it right, another order from the governor. Does that sound familiar? It shouldn't sound that familiar. And that is one of my heartaches with this special session. I couldn't think of a more important reason to get our hired and voted in electeds to go back to work and to start problem solving all of these issues. And one of them is we're looking at the governor is operating under a directive statute. And quite frankly, I think that the Senate and the House need to do some gubernatorial power checks on how long the governor can just start issuing out mandates, almost mandates at will, using his or her own interpolation of what it's going to take to flatten a curve. What are the underlying conditions? We've seen a number of things happen, but you know, quite frankly, it's just really time for us to go back to work and address these issues. It was such a missed opportunity this year. Another directive, you know, how about a detailed plan on getting out of the way so we can have our businesses become employers again and people can engage back into society more openly and freely. Like I say, it comes with a big heavy stick. I'm trying to find some way where Olympia will again try to incentivize each one of us to go out and be successful again. And we're going to have to deal with the pandemic. It's not going to go away. However,
15 seconds.
I have a big sneaking suspicion a lot of the mask issue will resolve itself on November 3rd when the voters speak.
So
Time's
Dean,
up.
thank you, Jeff. Dean, what are your thoughts on another stay home, stay healthy order?
Well, if it's that bad, and I mean, right now the rates are starting to go up just about everywhere in our state and across the nation. If you look at the maps, if it's that bad and we have to do something, we have to do something. But I want to remind Jeff that these governor proclamations are signed off on by the Senate and the House, Republican and Democratic leadership. If you don't want to have these, all the Republican leadership has to do is not sign off on these and they're done. So there is some agreement, so to speak, with the leadership of the Republicans and the Senate and the Democrats about these proclamations. Now, do I agree with every one of them? Not necessarily. And early on, when we had so many of them that were coming down, I was on the phone and personally talked to the governor a couple of times and was on a number of conference calls with him, saying that I didn't agree with some things that didn't make sense. Some of the building moratorium issues that they had on private construction versus public construction, I didn't agree with. One of the big ones was, because it's my district and I like clam digging, and a lot of people do, is why can't we have a clam tide? And they would not open up a clam tide last spring because they were just so afraid that too many people would go to the coast, like they did that one weekend that was so beautiful and the coast was just overrun with people.
15 seconds.
So, I've disagreed with a number of them, but I give the governor's office my opinion, and I guess my time's probably up.
All right,
Time is
thanks.
up.
Thanks, Dean. Jeff, do you have a rebuttal or anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. We talk about orders that say the words stay home and stay safe. And I'm going to tell all the viewers here tonight that I'm only buying 50% of that. Absolutely, we should stay safe. That should be paramount. But now we're under the constant rule of staying home. And it's not good enough for me to have a state senator to say, well, I spoke to the governor. He knows I don't agree with him, but we're just going to stay at home in the 19th district. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not going to
Time's
happen.
up.
We're going to all come together to resolve this.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So our next question is about minimum wage. Why should we have a state minimum wage? And what solution would you propose for the minimum wage issue that would be fair to employees and employers alike, including small businesses here in our district? We're wondering too about rural counties like Wahkiakum, and should they be treated exactly the same as our big city areas like Seattle? And Dean, you're first on that question. Minimum wage.
Well, should we be treated the same? In a lot of instances, not only minimum wage, but in a lot of things, certainly rural areas or areas that are struggling like we do down here recently, shouldn't be treated the same as perhaps the other area. The minimum wage, I think the minimum wage we have now and that's being phased in is probably, to me, it's acceptable. You're going to have, we should have a wage that somebody could live on, and even the minimum wage isn't a livable wage. And unfortunately, the ones that are losing their jobs right now under this COVID is those that are on the minimum wage. So I don't have a problem with the minimum wage. Should it be the same all across the state? Maybe not necessarily. There should be some consideration, given what the economics are in an area. And, we should perhaps look at some other things like, tip credits, I think, is an issue that should be looked at. I know business wants to have a look at that, and I'm not a real, I guess I could say, a big fan of it, but I do think it's probably something that we should look at in certain industries and occupations. So I guess the bottom line is, should the minimum wage be there? Yes, it should. Should it be the same?
15 seconds.
I think you can make some arguments that it could be different across the state.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Jeff?
Well, let's take it for the words that you used in the question. It's very important. Minimum wage. The word minimum alone is the precursor to this whole theory. Minimum wage should not be expected to be a family wage. And quite frankly, it really shouldn't be equaled into a living wage. It is a minimum, and the minimum is a beginning. Rather than argue about the minimum wage, I'm a big fan of talking about the maximum opportunity to get any wage, which is a chance to go to work. We need to be creating job employment opportunities. And the minimum wage, I don't have a lot of heartache with it, because I'm quite convinced that Seattle's going to set whatever minimum wage they want regardless. To me, the minimum wage is that initial stepping stone. It is the first step, the minimum at which you'll be reimbursed for your services rendered between you and the employer. And like I say, we want people to aspire. And as a legislature, we're going to need to create ways to make it very business friendly or employer friendly to create these jobs, whether they're minimum wage or not. But again, minimum wage is the start. I don't celebrate it as a very exciting thing, except it's just a beginning on the ladder to the climb of your economic, life that's ahead of you in your career. And I'll leave that at that. I don't have any particular numbers in mind or not. There's always some confusion why there's a federal minimum wage and then, of course, a state. It would seem a lot like we could find some common sense and maybe even find some common ground on that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Dean, do you have anything? No. Okay. All right. And then our next question is, what factors influence homelessness in the 19th district, and what solutions would you propose to mitigate these factors? Jeff?
Well, I've served on the homeless housing task force. I've been a citizen activist. I have worked in homeless camps, and I have some firsthand experiences in this problem. And that's what I'd like to offer to your audience, that this is not a 19th district problem. It's the same problem anywhere and everywhere. It's very complicated. Some people will say it's an addiction crisis. Some will say it's a mental health. It's a job crisis. It could be a number of things. Well, I'll offer to you most of my personal experience in this field is clearly shown that we have an out of control addiction problem. And I don't know what comes first, but I know that the addiction is the problem of most cities and towns in the 19th district. It seems to be the most visible aspect of it. But again, these are people. I am not interested in the drug. I am interested in that person. And so therefore, I do support all forms of recovery, including housing. But I stop short of enabling. I stop short of low barrier shelters where there are no rules. I think that is absolutely unacceptable anymore, to have zero consequences in front of society that you're asking to not have any rules with, when the rest of society has some form of rules. Back to my fairness talk earlier. This homeless issue is an ongoing issue. It's not going to be curable. It is treatable.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Dean?
Yeah, Jeff is right. It's not just a 19th district problem. It's even worse in a lot of areas, particularly when you get to the big urban areas. But the one thing that has been shown is that you have to get a person into a facility, some type of housing. And I know he doesn't approve of low barrier. If it takes a low barrier housing or a high barrier housing to get somebody in a place where somebody can have contact with them and start the process of having some kind of wraparound service, it doesn't matter to me. You know, I'd prefer they weren't low barrier, but you got to get them inside. And there's a practical aspect to it. If you tell these people that you can't come into the low barrier and they're sleeping on a street and they get injured, they get sick, they're going to go to the emergency room, and they obviously don't have insurance, and then we're paying for it. So, you know, it's a bigger problem than just saying, you know, it's like back in the old drug days of the Reagan administration. You just can't say no. No doesn't work. You got to have a program. And number one program is get them inside something. And God knows we've spent enough money on housing through the feds and through the state budget. But it's only going to get worse, you know, as this COVID thing hits. One of these days, we're going to eliminate the moratorium on evictions. And, you know, it's going to even explode even more then, I believe. I wish we would have done something a little different on evictions. Again, I've talked to the governor about
15 seconds.
and the Department of Commerce, and they're all waiting for the money, because that's what it's going to take, is money from the feds, is what everybody is waiting for. And unfortunately, when you wait for Fed money, you shouldn't hold your breath.
Time's up.
All right, thanks, Dean. Jeff, do you have anything you want to add?
Of course, the senator, I believe, was involved in legislation that removed the right for cities, say Cathlamet or Longview, to ban safe injection sites. I would have never have done that. I do not believe there's anything safe about a safe injection site. That, and I was a little shocked that the incumbent would support such. But hearing that he's in favor of no rules, I think this goes hand in hand with that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Our next question is, what leadership position will you take as a senator to ensure the right issues are heard and addressed on the topic of structural racism? And that would be Dean, your turn to start.
Oh, over the last number of years, we've done a number of bills dealing with, you know, racism and that whole general concept. You know, one thing that you know, it follows along in this same discussion is defund the police. I'm not going to go there. You know, I think we need to take a look at the police as far as, you know, the training and that. And a couple of years ago, we passed an initiative, you may recall, to take away some of the things that the police used to use and increase their training at the police academy. You know, and I have a broad brush stroke. I mean, I want to have a safe community. That's probably why the Sheriffs and Police Chief Association and the Washington State Troopers Association have endorsed me. You know, we got to have good policing, but I think we also have to have those programs, and we've set up a number of programs and studies and work groups and you name it to try and address some of this racial divide that we have. You know, you know, to me, I have a trouble really understanding racism, because I like to think that I'm not a racist, but but I will admit that I'm probably one of those privileged white that they talk about. I've never had to struggle with what a Black person does. So it's, you know, I try to have that open mind on both sides of this issue.
Time's up.
Thanks, Dean. Jeff?
Yeah, after listening to Dean's remarks about his police endorsements, I'll remind the audiences that police endorsements of any kind does not end racial or structural racism. Structural racism is deeply rooted into people. And, you know, the government, we've done a number of things as a country, starting with our 14th Amendment. We're supposed to apply all the laws equally to all men and women that live in this great country. And racism has no place in our modern day society. And in fact, I have such little tolerance of it. The number one thing that we do need to do is always talk about it. You know, racism, part of the structure is not to ever sweep it under the carpet. It's to continually talk about it. We need to teach its history, its modern place in history, and how we're going to continue to eradicate it in the future. The legislature always at times has trouble legislating morals and values. Listen, I'm a deep conservative person. I'm a God-fearing, family-loving man that has, again, no tolerance. My wife is in fact an immigrant, which really doesn't have any relevance, except that some would actually have some form of prejudice towards that. So when we speak of racism, we're gonna have to make that word prejudice synonymous. And as long as we keep talking about it, we should always enforce and respect the will of the United States Constitution.
15 seconds.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Dean, did you have anything?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Our next question is, what have you done or what would you do to bring back the large commercial and sports fishing salmon runs that are so important to the people of the 19th district? And Jeff, it would be your turn to go first.
That's cheating, because I already told your audience today I was out fishing on the Columbia. We went out in Woodland, and a beautiful day, and we were looking for what's called those elusive fish. Well, listen, they're at times elusive and at times they're not, but fish is a big, big issue. So let's jump right into the specifics. We know that a lot of politicians continually talk about predators. And yet, if you look at the cormorants will almost wipe out juvenile runs of fish coming into the Columbia River. We need to aggressively go after the cormorants. In fact, the fishing guide today had been doing this for years, and he was a former Fish and Wildlife employee. So this is my source today of the subject matter. We also need to really stock up with all of our brood stocks in all of the tributaries that we can. And in addition to that, all politicians are going to agree, come on, let's deal with the hatchery issue. And, you know, sport fishermen and commercial fishermen and the guides and the tribes, there should be plenty of fish for everybody without tearing dams down. You know, just those simple things: predator reduction, brood stocks, hatchery increases, maybe even rearrange some scheduling so the sports fishermen would say have a longer season. We've already increased the catch rate for gillneters from 20 to 30% on some runs. Listen, why don't we just also make more fish and provide a better fish environment to do so? I think everybody's going to win on the fish if we just come together.
Yeah, who doesn't love fish, right?
Yeah.
Dean, how about you?
Well, the thing that frustrates me, and I'm on the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board, and I've spoken, I don't know how many times, about my frustration that we just aren't raising the fish that we should. And part of the reason is the Department of Fish and Wildlife doesn't manage the fish anymore. It's the courts. The courts have put the restrictions on so many different runs to protect the, quote, naturally spawning fish, that we can't raise them in the hatcheries because we don't want to have them mixed up. Well, you know, my thought, and I know some people won't agree with me, is do we really want to stand at the side of a creek and watch a few fish swim up and breed naturally? Or do you want to stand on the side of the creek and have a bunch of fish that maybe they came from the hatchery, but you can actually catch them? And that's the thing that is so frustrating, is that our hatchery production has gone down, and, you know, all over the state. And I've spoken a number of times at places going, how come when the orcas started to starve, it was okay to raise more fish that were going to compete, hatchery fish that are going to compete with the natural spawning fish? How come we didn't do that when our sports and commercial fishermen wanted some more fish for their livelihood? So I'm very frustrated, have been, and I've, you know, I would like to do something legislatively, but when you have the courts, when you have the federal courts telling you that you can't mix these different stocks, you know, your hands are kind of tied. And yeah, we have picked up some hatchery production over the years, but nothing like we had years and years back. And I'll give you an example, since this is Wahkiakum County's forum. Go out to the Alokaman River and go to the Alokaman salmon hatchery that used to put out millions of fish. And now the races, the runways are cracked. There's trees growing up through them. The buildings have all been knocked down, and by tweakers taking the wire out of the walls. I tell you, it's a mess out there. And at one time, that place put out a ton of fish.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean. Jeff?
Yeah, you know, he's been the senator for 7 years. I've been a senator for 0 years. Under his watch, the charter fishermen of Westport have almost been wiped out. There's very few of them that even leave now. To even suggest that it's up to the courts. Yeah, we talking culverts? But a lot of the fish production, I will disagree with the senator on that. We should be doing a lot more instead of making excuses like I don't know what to do anymore, because I opened up immediately with predation. We could all come together at least on that issue. We need to do this instead of complain about it.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so we're to our last question. So I'd like to ask each of you to take 2 minutes and summarize what you want our audience to know about you and your position on issues. And I would like, it looks like this time it's Dean's turn to go first.
This is our wrap up?
This is your wrap up, 2 minutes to tell us exactly what you want your audience to know about you and your position.
Okay. Well, I would really like to have you send me back to Olympia, because I think I do a good job of reflecting the values of the 19th district. I grew up here. I've hunted. I've fished the Willapa Hills all my life. In fact, I'm looking forward to next Saturday, Sunday, opening a deer season. You know, I've been very successful in bringing projects, whether they were capital projects of one type of another or transportation projects to the district. You can go down to Pacific County and see 6 new bridges on state highways that were done a few years ago. You can go down Kath Lammett. I'm very proud to say that it's not a lot of money, but I got that money for the Pioneer Center, and I just got a call the other day that it's wrapping up, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I've got a history of really going to bat for the projects. You know, the sawmill over in Raymond, the boat decommissioning for derelict vessels in El Waco. You know, I stand up for the things that are in the district. When the electrolytic, there's a large factory in town that uses what's called the electrolytic process for their product, and they use a ton of electricity, and they were exempt on it. They were going to lose that exemption. And if it would have been lost, we probably would have lost about 60 really well-paying jobs. And it was a lot of work, but I convinced the budget people that let's put that exemption back on, and that saved about 60 jobs. So that's the kind of thing I do. Is, you know, I'm not flashy. I just work.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Jeff, 2 minutes.
Yes,
tell us what you believe.
Well, I didn't even believe in entering politics till I was 55 years old. I don't have much of a stomach for career politicians. and I base that on, I don't mean to be rude tonight, but in my closing, I'd like to remind everybody I am currently a port commissioner. I'm very proud of that. I have cut taxes 53%. I have kept every one of my political promises, and I've created jobs. I have not heard my opponent once tell us how many new jobs he's been able to produce for the 19th district. You know, just to the west of Wahkiakum County, Pacific County has been hovering at 14.9% unemployment. It's unacceptable. The voters stated very clearly in the primary they want change, and I'm asking the voters to support me November 3rd, and my promise to not support any income taxes. My promise is going to be to keep my promises. My track record will speak volumes to my transparency issues. I have been aggressive tonight. It's kind of part of what I need to do. I'm not going to have an easy time of listening to somebody defend a practice that we all know, like ghost title bills, is wrong, and quit giving speeches about it. Somebody said they're a doer. Well, I'll take care of that. I won't give you a speech to make you promise and agree that it's right. That's going to be one of my legislative priorities. But the number one thing I offer to anybody tonight that had the chance to tune in, without any hesitation, I will respect the will of the voter and follow the Constitution. And with those two guiding principles, you know, we really can't go wrong. So thank you for the opportunity tonight. I'm just so proud of how Wahkiakum gets along, and you're the leader at that. And thank you for this opportunity tonight. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for coming. Dean, do you have a last rebuttal?
No, that's fine. It's
okay. All right. I would just like to take a minute and thank both of you for your time this evening, for being willing to come and answer our questions. I'd encourage our viewers to view the primary forum debate between both of these two candidates. It can be seen on our YouTube channel. And I would also like to thank everybody who joined us on Zoom. And also a big thank you to both the Wahkiakum County Democratic and Republican parties for hosting the debate and working together to bring these candidates to our district. And the YouTube recording of this debate will remain up for the next until the election is over, and you can find it at Wahkiakum RaadDteam. We'd like to encourage everybody out there to vote. Ballots are due November 3rd, so be sure to fill yours out and be sure to get everybody you know to vote. Thank you both and have a great evening.
Are you still there, Ron?
Yeah, I think Ron's there. Thanks, Dean.
You bet.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I'm going to